Vince lived in the same town that I did when I was growing up. We started kindergarten together. We were friends in the first grade and the second grade. Saw him every day. And then in third grade, Vince got big. He got about 4 inches taller than the rest of us, and he got big. And his fists got big. And I look back on it now and I say his ego and his id got big, and he became a bully, and I became his target. Halfway through the third grade, he would hit me, and hard. He ran after me, he would tackle me, he beat on me, always body punches, always kidney punches, never the face, nothing that would ever show. This was the early 70s. Back when kids kind of raised themselves, when you went out the front door on a Saturday at about 8:30 in the morning after a big bowl of cereal, and you came back maybe for lunch, but probably ate lunch at somebody else's house, and then you weren't seen until you heard somebody calling you for dinner. And you came back, and whatever happened during that was your day. And if you had issues, you worked them out. It never even occurred to me to talk to my parents about what was happening at school and on the way home from school. This was also the early 70s when the cultural message was, well, you should be happy. And if you're not happy, you must be doing something wrong. And nobody wants to admit they're wrong, particularly a third grader. I did try to fight back a couple of times, hoping that I would connect a punch like the kids who fought back on the after-school specials did. And finally it caused Vince enough pain that he would back off and know that I could swing, but that's not the response I got. He smiled. And I soon figured out that he was a lot like the cats that ran the neighborhood. They kind of enjoyed when their quarry was struggling. That was Vince's approach. He seemed to really enjoy when I fought back. The second response that I went to church. I went to Sunday school, and going to church, I knew all of the scriptures that had to do with forgiveness. Love your neighbor like Jesus. Turn the other cheek. Forgive 7 times, 77 times. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. I even knew the passage out of Matthew 18 where Jesus talks about, if someone has sinned against you, go and talk to them and tell them and try to get them to listen to you. And if they listen to you, then you can resolve that with them together. And if they don't listen to you, take somebody from the church. I tried that. Vince wouldn't listen. I told a Sunday school teacher about it, trying to get her help with this. I think she was scared of Vince too. She told me that I was probably doing something to cause him to be angry. I should just try to be nicer. That was the adult leadership that I received. I tried to placate Vince, to be his friend, like I learned in Sunday school. The after-school specials I helped him with homework when he struggled. But that didn't solve the problem. I still got hit. I still got verbally berated. I was terrified to go to school and to come home. I remember one day after school, Vince was beating on me over by the bus barn. He'd kind of trapped me in a corner by the gas tank. And a teacher saw us out the window, and she came shooting across the street, and she corralled both of us. I believe that her assumption was we were fighting. We were not fighting. We were not fighting. We were trying to protect ourselves. And so she hauled us back into the school and started to talk to both of us. And having the big mouth, I said, "Can I just tell you what was going on?" "Well, what is it?" I said, "Vince was hitting me. I wasn't hitting Vince." And it took her a minute, and then she was able to hear that and turned on Vince and said, "Were you hitting him?" And he sat there and tears ran down his face. He apologized to me. He said it would never happen again. I believed him. So did the teacher. And we were released to go home. She believed that we should walk together, so we walked together. Vince got threatened that if she caught him beating on me again, that he would not get recess, and that she would even call his mother, Edwina. And he promised it'll never happen again. And we walked toward home, and and he was nice, and I allowed myself to believe that my suffering had paid off, that getting caught was going to change him, and we were going to be able to be friends. And that lasted until we rounded the corner where we were no longer visible from the school, and he turned and slugged me in the belly and blamed me for getting him into trouble. So we come to church and we hear about forgiveness. Jesus said it on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He's talking about the people who nailed him to wood. What do we do with that? Oh, confusion? Yeah. Not even the right word. We don't have a word for befuddled. What do we do with that? Forgiveness is a nice word, but I think we're really fuzzy on the meaning. I think most of us have difficulties with the notion of forgiveness because we confuse it with what Jesus describes in Matthew 18, which is reconciliation. Most people think that what we call reconciliation is forgiveness. You approach somebody, you talk it over, you tell them, "You have hurt me, you've harmed me, you've done this to me, it caused me pain," and they go, "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry." And then you resolve it and you go on. And that's not forgiveness. That's reconciliation. Forgiveness means something else, I think. Reconciliation, what Jesus describes in Matthew 18 about approaching someone and talking it over and coming to a resolution. The relationship is not right. We've got to go forward in a new way. We both commit to a new way, and the relationship can be. Reconciliation, as defined by Jesus, requires two people, both of whom are committed to the relationship, both of whom can look at what has been happening and say to one another, "Yes, I see, it's not right. How do we repair the breach that has broken between us?" We acknowledge something is not right in our relationship. We commit to changing our ways. Most people in our culture call this forgiveness. It's not forgiveness, it's reconciliation. And here's the kicker. Jesus encourages reconciliation. It takes two people. Jesus encourages reconciliation. He does not require it. Jesus commands us to forgive. So what do we do when we're in a relationship with someone, whether we want to be or not, and they're beating on us? We've approached them, we've said, "This isn't working, we need to change things," and they go, "You're a wuss. Man up. You're just complaining. It was all a joke." Or worse, they beat us even more. What do we do? What do you do? Imagine your Vince. The looks on your faces are telling me you know exactly what I'm talking about. Imagine your Vince, the person who hit you, who attacked you, your bully. Whenever they're near, you go into a cold sweat. You're terrified they're going to hit you, they verbally attack you. You have tried all of the methods that you've learned at church. You've tried all the methods that Jesus describes in Matthew 18. Everything that you can muster. You've tried to be nicer. You've tried giving in. You've tried letting them off the hook. You've tried having the talk with them where you say it's not right between us. You've tried confronting them. You might even have gotten out your anger and let them see that. You've tried asking friends what you ought to do. Nothing works. There's no acknowledgement. And therefore, there can be no reconciliation. Reconciliation, by Jesus' definition, requires two people, both of whom are committed to the relationship and are willing to acknowledge there's been a breach, a violation, there's been harm, and both are willing to commit to a new relationship, a new way of relating to one another. And if one of the people will not participate in that, there can be no reconciliation. We're just listening to Jesus. We're just sorting out what Jesus tells us. Jesus commands, he encourages reconciliation. Jesus commands us to forgive. And so he doesn't say this, but we have to understand, we have to assume, we have to figure out, Jesus commands us to forgive. So forgiveness must be something that does not require the participation of our abuser, that does not require a second party to agree to restore the relationship. So forgiveness must be something that doesn't require us to restore relationships that are destructive and have shattered our ability to trust people. Forgiveness must be something that we can do all by ourselves, alone. And here's my take, and I get this from watching Jesus. Forgiveness has to do with letting go of all of those feelings that we develop when we are being abused and harassed. Feelings of anger and bitterness and revenge. All the lists that we make in our head of what we would want to do to them if given the chance. Forgiveness is not about reunion. Forgiveness is not about restoration. Forgiving may make us capable of those things, but it's not expected, it's not required, it's not part of the definition of forgiveness. For fixing the relationship is reconciliation. And I want to say, reunion sometimes is inappropriate. Reunion with our abuser is sometimes harmful. Even if we forgive a former classmate that we wanted to be friends with, may not be good for us. A former spouse may still be deep in the wiles of abuse. A former partner may still be a crook, a liar, a thief, and a bully. Being forgiven does not qualify a person to be a friend, a spouse, a partner. And if a person does not qualify, we are better to walk away from them, to forgive them, to move them out of our lives, to say, no, thank you. We go our own way. And I don't know how to say this other than this: forgiveness leads us to utter indifference about the person who has abused us? Well, we love them in the way that we love all people. We want what's best for them from a distance. We pray for them. We want macharios to catch up with them. Macharios, where they're drawn into the presence of God. God gets a hold of them. God speaks to them. They are changed by God, not by us. We've tried. It didn't work. That person, for whatever reason, decided they don't listen to us. And it's best for us to let them go forgiven. We become, and this is how we rescue ourselves a little bit. We become indifferent to what their voice used to do in us. Think about your Vince and what happened in you when you heard that voice. Think about your Vince. I'm thinking about walking to school, and every day I would hope that Vince would stay home sick. And I would round the corner, and there he would be. All I had to do was see him. My heart sank. It didn't sink. It dropped into my belly. And I could hear it. It sounded like dropping a large stone into a pool of water. Just, and my feet became heavy, and my arms began to hurt, and I began to look to the left and to the right for where can I run to be away from him? How can I get in the eye line of a teacher who will be in the way of Vince beating on me? To forgive means that I become utterly indifferent in that memory. Vince may threaten or bluster or push old buttons. He may have tears running down his face as he said, "I'm sorry, it'll never happen again." I no longer respond. I love Vince from a distance. In the same way that I love all the people in the world who I no longer know, somebody that I used to know, has no effect on who I am, has no effect on how I act, has no effect on how I respond to the world. I'd like to tell you that's true. I really would. I'd like to tell you that Vince had nothing to do with the fact that when I was in ROTC in college, the first class I signed up for was fighting. I'd like to tell you that it has no effect on the reason that it just bothers me when young people don't get along with each other. I want to intervene. I want to get in the middle. I want to stick up for the little kid, always. And the little kid may be the one who's thrown the punch. So I'm probably not the best person to sort that kind of stuff out. I'd like to tell you it has nothing to do with the fact that I have a little bit of trouble with trust. I'd like to tell you that, but Vince was my bully. And he left an imprint on me. We see forgiveness in Jesus as we watch him through his ministry. People with poor boundaries asked him questions to corner him. It's a harassment tactic. Jesus was not deterred from what he needed to do. People with control issues tried to get Jesus to back down. It's an intimidation tactic. Jesus does not swerve from what he is about. People who overestimate their importance talk trash and threaten his life and use fear to try to get him to shut up. It's a bullying tactic. Jesus does not allow what anyone else says or does to alter his commitment to living a life that is appropriate to God's way. A life that is life-giving, a life that is healing. I can apply that to Vince, I think. No matter what Vince might do, no matter what he might say now, no matter how he might act, I am not present with him. I'm indifferent. I'm apathetic about my Vince. And it feels mean, but forgiving, I think, has given me back the power of deciding how I'm going to live my life. Vince no longer holds that. It's like a good divorce. Two people who cannot be together, going on with their lives apart. That's our responsibility if we're listening to Jesus. Forgiveness does not mean that we must let those who hurt us back into our lives. That would be reconciliation, and that very much depends on the other person, very much depends on the effect of the abuse. Sometimes the damage is too deep. Sometimes it goes on too long. Sometimes it put us into shock. Sometimes it reached the point of trauma. Stole from us our sense of self, devastated our ability to trust people, wrecked our peace. Their presence, their voice, their memory adversely affects our mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. That's what I wrote here, because right now I'm in a cold sweat. And I'm being reminded how come I have to say no to Vince. One of the happiest days of my life was following 5th grade. Our family moved away from this town. Yeah. I got to shift out of survival mode and into recovery. I got to figure out how to move forward. And someday I hope to fully heal. It was at the Insight Bowl. One of the years the Iowa Hawkeyes, I grew up in Iowa, one of the years the Iowa Hawkeyes went to the Insight Bowl. I was in ASU Stadium for the Insight Bowl. I was reading my program that they'd given out, and I looked up, and there standing in front of me was Vince. He greeted me like we were old friends. He said, "I thought that was you. I saw you and I came over to say hi." Said we should get together. Said we should catch up on old times. His voice was lower, but it was the same. His face was older, but it was the same face. His front teeth no longer had the gap, and his hands were still huge. My blood went cold, my chest got tight. I took a deep breath. He handed me his business card. I took it. He lives in the valley. He said, "Call me." Jesus commands us to forgive, to let go of anger and resentment and the desire for revenge. Jesus commands us to forgive. Move this person and their presence and their effect on me out of the apartment in my head. No longer allow them to tell me who I am or what I'm about. And it took me a couple of seconds after Vince had walked away to realize that all that stuff over the year, when you go to counseling and you start making those lists of all the stuff that if you ever saw that person again, this is what you're going to say. Oh, if I ever met Vince again, you know what I would do to him? Took me about 3 seconds to realize that all of that had not come up. It was, in fact, gone. And a moment later, when I went up to the concession stand, I put his business card in the trash.